In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death whispered through every canyon and survival meant outsmarting an enemy that knew every rock and crevice, military commanders faced their greatest challenge. Taliban fighters had turned the rugged terrain into a deadly maze, picking off coalition forces with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Morale was crashing. Casualty reports were stacking up on desks back home. Something had to change. Then came a rumor that spread through the barracks like wildfire. Stories of an impossible figure moving through the shadows, a phantom who could appear anywhere, strike with lethal accuracy, and vanish without a trace. Enemy combatants began whispering about a curse, a vengeful spirit that hunted them in the darkness. Coalition soldiers started calling this mysterious figure the Ghost Sniper, but here's what no one expected. The deadliest marksman in one of the most dangerous war zones on Earth wasn't the grizzled veteran everyone imagined. It wasn't the battle-hardened soldier with 20 years of combat experience. It wasn't even a man at all. The truth would shake the very foundations of military tradition and force a stubborn general to confront his deepest prejudices. Because sometimes, the most unlikely heroes emerge from the shadows to prove that courage, skill, and determination know no boundaries. This is the story of how one person's extraordinary abilities changed the course of a conflict and challenged everything the military thought they knew about warfare. The morning sun cast long shadows across Forward Operating Base Chapman, but the light brought no comfort to the men and women stationed there. In the briefing room, tension hung thick as cigarette smoke as Colonel Marcus Rodriguez stood before a room full of his best officers. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights spent staring at casualty reports. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have a problem," Rodriguez began, his voice gravelly from stress and exhaustion. "In the past 6 weeks, we've lost 14 good soldiers to sniper fire. 14 families back home are planning funerals instead of welcome home parties. The Taliban has positioned marksmen throughout the Korangal Valley, and they're picking us off like we're targets in a shooting gallery." Captain James Mitchell, a seasoned infantry officer with 2 previous tours under his belt, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd seen the fear creeping into his soldiers' eyes. Every patrol had become a game of Russian roulette, never knowing which step might be their last. "What's our current strategy, sir?" Mitchell asked, though he already knew the answer would be insufficient. "Counter-sniper teams, air support when available, and route changes every 48 hours," Rodriguez replied, the frustration evident in his tone. "But these bastards know this terrain better than we know our own backyard. They're using the mountains like a fortress, and we're walking into their kill zone every single day." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the youngest officer in the room, raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, what about our own sniper capabilities? Surely we have marksmen who can engage them on equal terms." A bitter laugh escaped Rodriguez's lips. "That's the worst part, Lieutenant. We've got some of the best trained snipers in the world stationed right here. Staff Sergeant Williams has over 40 confirmed kills from his previous deployments. Sergeant First Class Thompson took out a high-value target from over 800 meters just last month. But these mountains, this enemy, it's different. They disappear like ghosts." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the gravity of their situation. These weren't inexperienced soldiers. They were battle-tested veterans who had faced down insurgents in Iraq, cleared buildings in Fallujah, and survived firefights that would break ordinary people. But the Korangal Valley was earning its nickname as the Valley of Death with each passing day. Across the base, in a much smaller and considerably less decorated building, Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez was cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else in her life. At 28 years old, she had already completed 3 tours of duty, but this assignment was different. She wasn't here as a sniper, despite having graduated at the top of her class from sniper school. Instead, she was assigned to intelligence gathering, analyzing enemy movement patterns, and providing tactical support for patrol routes. Elena had grown up in a small town in Montana where her father had taught her to hunt from the age of 12. By 15, she could drop a deer at 400 yards in conditions that would challenge experienced hunters. Her natural ability with a rifle was evident to anyone who spent time at the shooting range with her, but military bureaucracy and institutional bias had kept her away from frontline sniper duties. "Women aren't built for that kind of pressure," she remembered her first commanding officer telling her during basic training. "Stick to intelligence work, soldier. That's where you'll be most useful." But Elena knew better. She had always known better. During training exercises, she consistently outperformed her male counterparts. Her scores at sniper school weren't just good, they were exceptional. Her instructors had quietly admitted among themselves that they'd never seen natural talent quite like hers. Yet here she was, analyzing satellite photos and radio intercepts, while men with half her skill were getting picked off by enemy snipers. The frustration was eating at her, but Elena had learned to channel that energy into preparation. Every day after her intelligence duties were complete, she would find her way to the base's shooting range. She studied wind patterns, memorized the ballistic properties of every rifle in their arsenal, and practiced shots that most snipers would never attempt. Word of her abilities had begun to spread quietly through the base, but it was the kind of whispered reputation that stayed in the shadows. Military hierarchy was a powerful thing, and questioning assignments based on gender was still a career-limiting move for everyone involved. Then came the morning that changed everything. Private First Class Danny Rodriguez, the colonel's nephew and a communications specialist, burst into the intelligence building with barely controlled panic in his eyes. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, ma'am, you need to come with me right now. My uncle wants to see you immediately." Elena looked up from the reconnaissance photos she'd been studying, surprised by the urgency. "What's this about, Rodriguez?" "Ma'am, there's been another attack. Patrol 7 Delta was ambushed about 2 clicks north of here. We've got 3 wounded and..." His voice cracked slightly. "And Sergeant Williams is down. The sniper got him." The blood drained from Elena's face. Staff Sergeant Williams wasn't just one of their best snipers, he was considered nearly untouchable. If the enemy had managed to take him out, the situation had just escalated beyond anything they'd faced before. "How bad is it?" she asked, already moving toward the door. "Williams is stable, but out of commission for months. Took a round through the shoulder that shattered his collarbone. But that's not the worst part, ma'am. The worst part is how it happened." Elena waited for him to continue as they hurried across the base toward the command building. "The sniper was using a position that our guys had already cleared twice. Williams was set up in Overwatch, had perfect sight lines, everything by the book. But somehow this Taliban fighter got into a position that should have been impossible to reach without being seen. Took the shot from maybe 600 meters through what looked like a gap between rocks that couldn't have been more than 6 inches wide." As they reached the command building, Elena could see the controlled chaos that always followed a successful enemy attack. Medics were treating the wounded, officers were shouting orders, and radio chatter filled the air with status reports and casualty updates. But what struck her most was the look on Colonel Rodriguez's face when she entered his office. It wasn't just anger or frustration anymore. It was something closer to desperation. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Lives depend on it." "Yes, sir." "I've been hearing rumors about your shooting abilities. Word is you're better than some of our designated marksmen. True or false?" Elena felt her pulse quicken. This conversation could go several different ways, and most of them involved her being reassigned to an even more mundane position. "Sir, I've always scored well on marksmanship tests, but I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm asking if you think you could do better than Williams." "I'm asking if you think you could take out these Taliban snipers that are killing my soldiers." Rodriguez leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because if there's even a chance that you can help us solve this problem, I'm willing to listen." For a moment, Elena was speechless. After years of being told that her skills weren't needed, that intelligence work was more appropriate, suddenly the man in charge was asking if she could do the impossible. "Sir, I believe I could be effective in a sniper role, but I would need to understand the full tactical situation before making any commitments." Rodriguez nodded and pulled out a detailed map of the surrounding area. Red X marks indicated where they had lost soldiers to sniper fire over the past 6 weeks. The pattern was unmistakable even to Elena's trained eye. "These positions are all elevated, with multiple escape routes and natural camouflage," she observed, studying the map carefully. "The enemy is using classic mountain warfare tactics, but there's something else here." "What do you see?" Elena traced her finger across the map, connecting the various attack sites. "They're not just random strikes. There's a pattern here that suggests the same sniper, or at least the same team, is responsible for most of these kills. Look at the angles, the ranges, the timing. This isn't just someone taking opportunistic shots. This is someone who understands how we operate and is specifically targeting our key personnel." The colonel's expression grew even more serious. "That's exactly what our intelligence analysis suggested. We're not just dealing with random Taliban fighters anymore. We're dealing with someone who's been specifically trained to hunt coalition snipers." As Elena continued studying the map, she began to see the larger picture emerging. The enemy wasn't just trying to inflict casualties, they were trying to demoralize the entire base by proving that even their best marksmen weren't safe. It was psychological warfare at its most effective. "Sir, if I may ask, what changed your mind about considering me for this role?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment before answering. Honestly, desperation. I've got generals breathing down my neck about these casualties, families back home asking why their sons and daughters aren't coming back alive, and an enemy that seems to anticipate our every move. I can't afford to let politics or tradition get in the way of keeping my soldiers alive. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the base. Williams was supposed to be our answer to this problem. He's got more experience than anyone else here, and he knows these mountains better than most. But experience and knowledge aren't enough anymore. I need someone who can think differently, who can approach this problem from an angle that the enemy won't expect. Elena felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. This was about saving lives and changing the course of a conflict that was spiraling out of control. What exactly are you proposing, sir? I'm proposing that you take Williams' place as our primary counter-sniper specialist. Full authority to choose your equipment, your positions, and your methods. The only requirement is results. The offer hung in the air between them like a challenge. Elena knew that accepting would mean stepping into a role that would test every skill she had developed over her entire military career. It would also mean that failure wouldn't just reflect on her. It would cost lives. But she also knew that this was the opportunity she'd been preparing for her entire life, even when she didn't realize it. Every hour spent on the shooting range, every training exercise, every night spent studying enemy tactics had been building toward this moment. I'll need access to all intelligence reports from the past 6 weeks, detailed topographical maps of every area where we've lost people, and the freedom to modify our patrol routes based on my assessment of enemy positions. Done. What else? I'll need to handpick my spotter and have direct communication with patrol leaders in the field. If I'm going to be effective, I can't be working through layers of command structure when seconds matter. Rodriguez nodded. Anything else? Elena looked once more at the map, her mind already beginning to formulate a plan that would either make her a hero or get her killed in the process. I'll need 20 years, 4 hours to prepare, and then I want to be in position before the next scheduled patrol. If this sniper is as good as I think he is, he'll be expecting us to change our tactics. What he won't be expecting is for us to start hunting him the same way he's been hunting us. As Elena left the colonel's office, she felt the eyes of every soldier on the base following her. Word had already begun to spread that something was changing, that their response to the sniper threat was about to evolve. Some of those looks held skepticism, others held hope, but all of them held the same desperate need for someone, anyone, to put an end to the fear that had been stalking them through the mountains. That night, as Elena prepared her equipment and studied intelligence reports by lamplight, she couldn't shake the feeling that her entire life had been leading to this moment. Tomorrow, she would step out of the shadows and into a role that would define not just her own future, but the future of every soldier counting on her to keep them alive. The ghost sniper was about to be born, though no one knew it yet. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Elena like a familiar embrace as she made her final preparations. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking each piece of equipment with the methodical precision that had been drilled into her during years of training. The weight of the M24 sniper rifle felt perfectly balanced in her grip, its scope gleaming dully in the weak light filtering through the window of her temporary workspace. Corporal Michael Torres, her chosen spotter, watched with barely concealed admiration as she worked. Torres was a 24-year-old from Texas who had earned his reputation through steady nerves and an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions. He had volunteered immediately when word spread that Elena was looking for a spotter, despite the raised eyebrows from some of the veteran soldiers. "You sure about this, Sergeant?" Torres asked quietly, adjusting his own equipment. "Not questioning your abilities, but this guy we're hunting, he's taken out 3 of our best marksmen. Williams, Henderson, and Rodriguez all had more field experience than either of us." Elena looked up from her rifle, meeting his gaze steadily. "Experience is important, Torres, but it's not everything. Sometimes experience can become a limitation if it makes you predictable. This enemy sniper has been successful because he understands how experienced American snipers think and operate. But he's never faced someone like me." "What makes you different?" Elena smiled grimly as she attached the final components to her scope. Every one of those guys learned to shoot in the military. They learned standard tactics, standard positions, standard approaches. I learned to hunt in the Montana wilderness when I was 12 years old. My father taught me to think like prey if I wanted to catch prey. The Taliban sniper thinks he's the hunter, but today he becomes the hunted. As they prepared to move out, Elena's mind was already working through the intelligence she had absorbed over the past 24 hours. The enemy sniper's pattern was becoming clear to her in ways that the previous analysis had missed. While others focused on the individual attacks, Elena saw the larger tactical picture emerging. The sniper wasn't just picking random targets of opportunity. He was specifically studying their patrol patterns, learning their communication protocols, and identifying their most vulnerable personnel. Each attack was designed not just to inflict casualties, but to gather information for more effective future strikes. "He's learning from us," Elena had told Colonel Rodriguez during their final briefing. "Every time we respond to his attacks, we're teaching him more about our capabilities and limitations. But that works both ways. His attacks have also taught us about his capabilities and limitations." Now, as they moved through the darkened base toward their insertion point, Elena carried with her a plan that she hoped would turn the hunter's own methods against him. The helicopter ride to their deployment area was tense and silent. Elena and Torres sat among a full squad of infantry soldiers who would be conducting a routine patrol through the same area where Sergeant Williams had been wounded 2 days earlier. To outside observers, it would look like business as usual, a standard patrol with standard protective measures. What the enemy wouldn't see was Elena and Torres separating from the main group before dawn and taking position in a location that would give them oversight of the entire area while remaining invisible to anyone watching from the known sniper positions. As the helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash, Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with entering hostile territory. But underneath the adrenaline was something else, something she had never experienced before in her military career. For the first time, she was stepping into a role where her unique skills would be put to their ultimate test. The squad moved out in standard formation, their movements coordinated and professional, despite the knowledge that they were walking into an area where enemies might be watching their every step. Elena and Torres separated from the group after the first kilometer, melting into the rocky terrain with a stealth that impressed even the experienced infantry soldiers. Finding the right position took Elena nearly 3 hours of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and shred equipment. But her childhood in Montana had taught her to read landscape in ways that most soldiers never learned. Where others saw impassable rock faces, she saw natural pathways. Where others saw exposed positions, she saw perfectly camouflaged shooting points. Finally, as the sun began to climb above the eastern peaks, Elena found what she was looking for. A cluster of boulders provided natural cover, while offering sightlines that covered 3 of the most likely enemy positions. More importantly, it was a location that traditional military thinking would dismiss as too exposed, too obvious, too risky. "This is it," she whispered to Torres as they settled into position. "From here we can observe without being observed." Torres studied the surrounding terrain through his spotting scope, his expression skeptical. "Sergeant, we're pretty exposed here. If someone spots us, we don't have a lot of escape routes." "That's exactly why this position works," Elena replied, adjusting her rifle and scope with minute precision. "Every American sniper who's operated in this area has chosen positions based on maximum cover and multiple escape routes. That's exactly what this enemy expects. He's been successful because he knows how to find and target those kinds of positions." As the morning progressed, Elena's patience was tested in ways that even her extensive training hadn't fully prepared her for. Mountain warfare was different from anything she'd experienced before. The silence was profound, broken only by occasional wind and the distant sounds of the patrol conducting their mission several kilometers away. But Elena had learned patience during those long childhood mornings waiting for deer to appear along game trails. She understood that hunting was 90% waiting and 10% execution, and that the waiting was just as important as the shooting. Torres, meanwhile, was proving his value as a spotter in ways that went beyond his technical skills. His ability to read environmental conditions was helping Elena make precise calculations for wind speed, air density, and temperature variations that could affect bullet trajectory over long distances. "Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 800 meters," Torres whispered, his voice barely audible. Elena shifted her scope to the indicated position, her breathing automatically slowing as her training took over. Through the powerful lens, she could see a figure moving carefully among the rocks, carrying what appeared to be a rifle. "Can you confirm hostile intent?" she asked quietly. Torres watched through his own scope for several long minutes. "Definitely armed, definitely not coalition forces. He's moving toward an overwatch position that would give him sight lines on the patrol route." Elena felt her pulse steady into the rhythm that her instructors had called sniper calm. Every sense became hyper-aware, while her breathing and heart rate slowed to minimize any movement that might affect her accuracy. The figure in her scope was approximately 750 meters away, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood They were in dangerous territory. As Elena watched, the person took position behind a rock formation that would indeed provide an excellent vantage point for attacking the patrol when it returned along its planned route. Range confirmed at 740 meters, Torres whispered. Wind is steady from the northwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Temperature is rising, probably affecting air density. Elena made minute adjustments to her scope, compensating for the environmental factors that Torres had identified. At this range, even small miscalculations could mean the difference between a successful shot and a complete miss. But as she prepared to take the shot, something made her pause. The figure in her scope moved differently than she expected. The positioning was excellent, the equipment appeared professional, but something about the body language was wrong. Torres, watch this guy for another minute. Something's not right. Through her scope, Elena watched as the enemy sniper adjusted his position and equipment. His movements were competent, but not exceptional. More importantly, he was setting up in a position that would be effective against a returning patrol, but would also expose him to counter-sniper fire from several directions. This isn't our guy, Elena realized with sudden clarity. What do you mean? This sniper is competent, but he's not the one who took out Williams and the others. Look at his positioning. He's focused on the immediate tactical situation, but he's not thinking 3 steps ahead. The sniper who's been hunting our guys wouldn't set up in a position with this many vulnerabilities. Torres continued watching through his scope. So what do we do? Elena's mind was racing through possibilities. Taking out this sniper would be easy, and would certainly save Coalition lives when the patrol returned, but it would also reveal their position and capabilities to the real threat, who was almost certainly watching and learning from a position they hadn't identified yet. We wait, Elena decided. This guy is bait. The real sniper wants us to take this shot so he can identify our position and capabilities. If we engage now, we lose the advantage of being unknown. For the next hour, Elena and Torres maintained their position while watching the enemy sniper. It was one of the most difficult decisions Elena had ever made in her military career. Every instinct trained into her said to take the shot and eliminate the threat. But her intuition, developed through years of hunting in complex environments, told her that the real threat was still out there, watching and waiting. Finally, her patience was rewarded. Movement, 11 o'clock, approximately 900 meters. Torres whispered with urgent intensity. This one's different.
Elena shifted her scope to the new position and immediately understood what Torres meant.
The figure moving into position moved with fluid efficiency that spoke of extensive training and experience. More importantly, the position he was choosing offered excellent sight lines while providing multiple concealment and escape options. That's him, Elena said with quiet certainty. That's our guy. The enemy sniper was indeed setting up in a position that would allow him to observe and potentially target both the decoy sniper and any coalition forces that might engage him. It was a sophisticated tactical approach that explained why he had been so successful against their previous counter-sniper attempts. Range is 920 meters, Torres calculated quickly. Wind has shifted, now coming from the west at approximately 10 miles per hour. Angle is roughly 15 degrees downward. Elena made the necessary adjustments to her scope, but she also did something that none of her previous targets would have expected. Instead of immediately preparing to take the shot, she studied the enemy sniper's behavior patterns. For 20 minutes, she watched him work. She observed how he checked and rechecked his equipment, how he adjusted his position for maximum effectiveness, how he scanned potential target areas with methodical precision. Most importantly, she watched how he moved between different firing positions to maintain concealment. He's good, she admitted quietly to Torres. Very good. But he's also predictable in ways that he probably doesn't realize. What do you mean? He's been successful because he understands American military tactics and training, but he's been fighting the same kind of enemy for months now. He's developed patterns based on what he expects us to do. The problem is that I didn't learn to shoot in the American military. I learned to hunt from my father, who learned from his father, who learned from his grandfather, who was a scout in World War I. Elena's training had taught her to think like prey when hunting prey. Instead of approaching this as a military engagement, she was approaching it as a hunt. And in a hunt, the most important skill wasn't just accuracy. It was understanding your quarry well enough to predict their next move. The enemy sniper was clearly preparing to engage multiple targets in a carefully planned sequence. He would start with the decoy sniper to eliminate any counter-sniper threat, then shift to target the patrol when it returned along its planned route. It was a sound tactical plan that had probably worked for him before. But Elena wasn't going to give him the chance to execute that plan. Torres, I need you to radio the patrol and tell them to delay their return for 30 minutes. Tell them to maintain radio silence after that until they hear from us directly." "Roger that," Torres whispered, making the call. Elena settled into her final shooting position, her body automatically adjusting to maximize stability and minimize movement. At 920 meters, this would be one of the longest shots of her career, requiring precision that left no room for error. But as she prepared to take the shot, Elena realized that she felt completely calm. All the doubt, all the pressure, all the fear that had been building for days simply melted away. This was what she had been trained for, what she had been preparing for her entire life. The crosshairs in her scope settled on the target with steady precision. Elena controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to its optimal rhythm. The world around her faded until nothing existed except the rifle, the scope, and the target. She squeezed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar force, but Elena's attention was already focused on observing the results through her scope. At this range, it would take the bullet approximately 1.5 seconds to reach its target. The enemy sniper dropped immediately, the impact of Elena's shot clearly visible even at 900 meters. But more importantly, the shot had been precise enough to ensure that the threat was eliminated without alerting the decoy sniper to their presence.
"Target down," Torres confirmed through his spotting scope.
Clean hit. Elena maintained her position, continuing to observe through her scope. The decoy sniper had clearly heard the shot, but he was looking in the wrong direction, scanning for threats from positions where traditional American snipers might set up. "Secondary target is still unaware of our position," Elena reported. "Do we engage?" Before Torres could respond, the decoy sniper made the decision for them. Apparently realizing that his overwatch was compromised, he began moving toward an escape route that would take him out of effective engagement range within minutes. Elena adjusted her scope and prepared for a much more difficult shot. The target was now moving. The range was still over 700 meters, and the angle was constantly changing as he moved through the rocky terrain. But Elena had been taking shots at moving targets since she was a teenager. Montana deer didn't stand still and wait to be shot, and her father had taught her to calculate lead time and movement patterns with instinctive precision. The second shot was even cleaner than the first. Both targets eliminated, Torres confirmed with obvious admiration. "I've never seen shooting like that outside of training videos." Elena lowered her rifle and looked at Torres with a slight smile. "That's because you've never hunted with someone who learned to shoot before they learned military tactics. Military training is excellent, but it's also standardized. Standardized approaches can be studied and counted. What we just did can't be studied because it's not standard." As they prepared to extract from their position, Elena felt a profound sense of satisfaction that went beyond mission accomplishment. For the first time in her military career, she had been able to use her full capabilities in service of protecting her fellow soldiers. But she also understood that this was just the beginning. Word of the ghost sniper who could eliminate enemy threats from impossible ranges would spread quickly through both coalition and enemy forces. The psychological impact would be significant, but it would also mean that future engagements would be even more challenging as the enemy adapted to this new threat. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Torres voiced what they were both thinking. "Sergeant, I think things are about to get very interesting around here." Elena nodded, already planning the next phase of their campaign against enemy snipers who thought they owned these mountains. "Torres, interesting is exactly what we want. Interesting means unpredictable. And unpredictable is the only advantage we need." The ridgeline position that Elena had chosen was both perfect and terrifying. From their concealed location among the rocks, she and Torres could observe the entire battlefield spread out below them like a deadly chess game coming to life. Enemy forces were moving with coordinated precision through multiple approach routes, their movements suggesting professional military training that went far beyond typical Taliban capabilities. "Jesus," Torres whispered as he scanned the area through his spotting scope. "There are way more of them than intelligence estimated. I'm counting at least 300 fighters, maybe more." Elena adjusted her rifle scope and began identifying priority targets among the advancing forces. Her training had taught her to look for command elements, communications personnel, and heavy weapons teams, but the sheer scale of the enemy operation was unlike anything she had encountered before. They're not just trying to take the base, she realized as she studied the enemy formations. They're trying to make a statement. This is designed to be a propaganda victory that proves American forces can be defeated even when they have superior technology and training. Through her scope, Elena could see enemy fighters carrying video cameras alongside their weapons. This wasn't just a military operation. It was being documented for distribution to global media outlets and recruitment networks. The thought of her fellow soldiers being overrun while enemy cameras recorded their defeat sent a cold fury through Elena that sharpened her focus to laser intensity. This wasn't just about military tactics anymore. It was personal. Torres, I need you to start identifying command elements. Look for anyone with radio equipment. Anyone giving orders. Anyone who appears to be coordinating movement between different groups. Roger that. I've got eyes on what looks like a command post approximately 800 meters south-southeast. Multiple personnel with communications gear, and they appear to be directing movement for the southern approach. Elena swung her rifle toward the indicated position, her scope revealing a cluster of fighters who were indeed coordinating the attack through hand signals and radio communications. Taking out this command element would disrupt the southern attack route and force the enemy to reorganize under fire. But as she prepared to engage, Elena noticed something that made her pause. The command post was positioned in a location that would be clearly visible from the base's defensive positions. Any sniper engaging from the base perimeter would have a clear shot at these targets. It's a trap, she said quietly. What do you mean? That command post is positioned specifically to draw sniper fire from the base. Look at the angles. Anyone shooting from our defensive positions would be exposed to counterfire from at least 3 different locations. Torres studied the tactical situation more carefully and confirmed Elena's assessment. You're right. There are overwatch positions here, here, and here that would have clear shots at anyone engaging from the base perimeter. Elena felt a grudging respect for the enemy commander who had planned this operation. The attack wasn't just about overwhelming firepower. It was about tactical sophistication that took American capabilities and responses into account. But the enemy's sophistication also created opportunities for someone operating outside their expectations. Torres, they're expecting the ghost sniper to engage from defensive positions around the base. What they're not expecting is for me to be behind their lines, targeting their command structure from positions they haven't planned for. Elena began identifying targets that would maximize disruption while minimizing her exposure to counterfire. The enemy's careful planning had created predictable patterns that could be exploited by someone operating from an unexpected location. Her first target was a communications specialist who was coordinating between the southern and eastern attack groups. The fighter was positioned approximately 700 meters away, using a large radio setup to relay orders between different elements of the attacking force. Elena settled into her shooting position, her breathing automatically slowing as her training took control. At 700 meters, environmental factors would significantly affect bullet trajectory, requiring precise calculations for wind speed, air temperature, and elevation differences. Wind is steady from the northwest at 12 miles per hour, Torres reported quietly. Temperature is dropping as the sun goes down. I'm reading approximately 15 degrees elevation difference to target. Elena made the necessary adjustments to her scope, her mind automatically calculating the complex ballistics required for a precise shot at this range. But she also did something that set her apart from conventional military snipers. She waited for the perfect moment when environmental conditions and target behavior aligned for maximum effectiveness. The shot, when she finally took it, was perfect. The enemy communication specialist dropped immediately, his radio equipment destroyed by the same bullet that eliminated him. The effect on the enemy formation was immediate and dramatic. Without coordination from their communications hub, the southern attack group began showing signs of confusion and hesitation. But Elena didn't pause to observe the results. She was already shifting to her next target, a heavy weapons team that was setting up a mortar position to provide fire support for the main assault. Range to mortar team is approximately 900 meters, Torres calculated quickly. Wind has shifted slightly, now coming from the west at 10 miles per hour. The mortar team was a more challenging target because they were actively moving and setting up their equipment. Elena would need to time her shot to catch them at a moment when the most critical personnel were exposed and stationary. She watched through her scope as the team worked with efficient precision to establish their firing position. There was clearly one person directing the setup, while others handled the physical placement of equipment. Elena waited until the team leader was positioned directly behind the mortar, providing clear identification of the most valuable target. Her second shot was even more precise than the first, eliminating the team leader and damaging the mortar equipment simultaneously. The psychological effect of these shots was becoming apparent throughout the enemy formation. Fighters who had been advancing with confidence were now moving more cautiously, looking over their shoulders and seeking cover from an invisible threat they couldn't locate or identify. They're starting to realize that someone is picking them off from outside their planned engagement area, Torres observed. Look at how their movement patterns are changing. Elena could see the confusion spreading through the enemy ranks as commanders tried to maintain their attack schedule while dealing with precision fire from an unknown location. Radio chatter was increasing as different groups tried to coordinate responses to the unexpected threat. But the enemy's confusion also created new opportunities. As they focused on trying to identify Elena's position, they were exposing other high-value targets that had previously been concealed or protected. Elena's third target was an enemy sniper who had been positioned to provide overwatch for the main assault force. The sniper was approximately 850 meters away, hidden among rocks that provided excellent concealment from ground-level observation. But from Elena's elevated position, the enemy sniper's location was clearly visible. More importantly, this sniper represented a direct threat to the soldiers defending the base, making him a priority target regardless of the tactical considerations. This shot would be the most challenging yet because the target was partially concealed and positioned at a difficult angle. Elena would need to calculate not just range and environmental factors, but also account for the limited target area presented by the enemy sniper's defensive position. She studied the target through her scope for several minutes, waiting for the optimal moment when the enemy sniper would expose enough of himself to present a viable target. When the opportunity came, Elena was ready. The enemy sniper shifted position to get a better view of the base's defensive perimeter, exposing his head and shoulders for just a few seconds. Elena's shot covered 850 meters in less than 2 seconds, striking the enemy sniper with precision that eliminated the threat instantly. The effect on enemy morale was becoming increasingly visible. What had started as a coordinated assault was beginning to break down into confused groups of fighters, who were more concerned about the invisible threat picking them off than about achieving their original objectives. But Elena knew that her success was also increasing the danger to her own position. Every shot she took provided the enemy with information about her general location, and they were clearly beginning to coordinate efforts to find and eliminate her. Movement on our 6, Torres reported with urgent intensity. Looks like they're sending teams to sweep the high ground. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they reach positions where they can spot us. Elena looked through her scope one more time, identifying potential targets that could maximize disruption before they were forced to relocate. The enemy's command structure was clearly adapting to her attacks, but they were also concentrating personnel in ways that created new opportunities. There, she said, indicating a cluster of fighters who appeared to be coordinating the search efforts. If I can take out their search coordinator, it might buy us time to extract before they locate our position. The range was over 1,000 meters, at the very limit of effective engagement distance for her equipment. Environmental conditions were becoming more challenging as darkness fell and wind patterns shifted. But the target was clearly directing search operations that would soon put Elena and Torres in serious danger. Elena made the complex calculations required for such a long-range shot, factoring in wind speed, air density changes due to falling temperature, and the significant elevation differences involved. She would have only one opportunity to take this shot before the approaching search teams made their position untenable. The shot required every bit of skill and experience Elena had developed over her entire career. At 1,000 meters, even small errors in calculation or execution would result in a complete miss. When she squeezed the trigger, Elena felt the familiar recoil of her rifle, but her attention was already focused on observing the results through her scope. The bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach its target, time that seemed to stretch into hours as she waited to see if her calculations had been correct. The enemy search coordinator dropped exactly where Elena had aimed, creating immediate confusion among the fighters who had been taking orders from him. The search operation began to lose coordination just as Elena and Torres were running out of time to extract from their position. "Time to go," Elena said, beginning to pack her equipment. "We've done what we came here to do." But as they prepared to extract, Torres spotted something that changed everything. "Sergeant, look at the base. Something's wrong." Elena looked toward forward operating base Chapman and immediately understood what Torres meant. The defensive fires that should have been engaging the enemy assault forces were sporadic and uncoordinated. Instead of the organized resistance they had expected, the base appeared to be struggling to mount an effective defense. They're being overrun, Elena realized with growing horror. The main assault was just a distraction. The real attack is coming from a direction we didn't see. Through her scope, Elena could see enemy fighters inside the base perimeter, engaging defenders in close-quarters combat that negated most of the advantages of superior American equipment and training. Elena faced the most difficult decision of her military career. The smart tactical choice was to extract immediately and link up with friendly forces outside the area. But extracting would mean abandoning her fellow soldiers to fight and die while she escaped to safety. Torres, we're going back in. Sergeant, that's suicide. We've accomplished the mission. The base has air support coming and reinforcements are en route. There's nothing more we can do from here. Elena looked once more through her scope at the battle raging inside the base perimeter. She could see individual soldiers fighting desperately against overwhelming odds, holding positions that were clearly untenable in hopes that help would arrive in time. Torres, those are our people down there, and the ghost sniper doesn't abandon her own. Elena began moving down the ridgeline toward the base, carrying her rifle and whatever ammunition she had left for what would certainly be the most dangerous mission of her life. Behind her, Torres hesitated for only a moment before following. If the ghost sniper was going back into hell, her spotter would be right beside her. The legend was about to face its ultimate test, not in the mountains where Elena had all the advantages, but in close quarters combat where everything she had learned about being invisible would be put to the ultimate test. Moving down the ridgeline toward the besieged base, Elena felt every instinct screaming at her to reconsider this decision. Everything in her training, everything in basic military doctrine, everything in common sense said that two soldiers attempting to influence a battle involving hundreds of combatants was not just futile but suicidal. But Elena had never been guided purely by military doctrine. Her father's lessons about hunting had taught her that sometimes the most desperate situations created the most unexpected opportunities. A wounded animal backed into a corner could be the most dangerous, but it could also be the most predictable. As they approached the base perimeter, the scale of the enemy breakthrough became painfully clear. The main assault that Elena had been disrupting was indeed a distraction, but it had been coordinated with infiltration teams that had penetrated the base's defenses through routes that intelligence had failed to identify. "Jesus Christ!" Torres whispered, as they reached a position where they could observe the fighting inside the base. "They're everywhere." Elena studied the tactical situation through her scope, her mind automatically analyzing firing angles, cover positions, and movement patterns, even as her heart raced at the sight of her fellow soldiers fighting for their lives. The enemy had achieved tactical surprise and local superiority through careful planning and coordination, but they had also concentrated their forces in ways that created vulnerabilities that a skilled marksman might be able to exploit. "Torres, look at their movement patterns. They're advancing through the base using predetermined routes that avoid our strongest defensive positions. That means they've been planning this attack for weeks, maybe months. How does that help us? Predetermined routes are predictable routes. If I can position myself along their planned advance, I might be able to disrupt their coordination the same way we did with their external assault forces." Elena identified a water tower on the northern edge of the base that would provide elevated shooting positions with sight lines covering multiple areas where enemy forces were advancing. Getting to that position would require crossing approximately 400 meters of open ground that was currently contested by both sides. "Sergeant, that's not just dangerous, that's impossible. Look at all the firepower between here and there." Elena studied the route more carefully, identifying covered positions, movement opportunities, and timing windows that might allow them to reach the water tower without being detected or engaged by either friendly or enemy forces. "Torres, impossible is just another word for something nobody's tried yet. Besides, they're not looking for anyone moving toward the fighting. Everyone else is moving away from it." Elena began moving toward the base perimeter, using every bit of stealth training she had ever received to remain invisible while crossing terrain that was being observed by dozens of armed combatants. Torres followed reluctantly, his respect for Elena's abilities warring with his certainty that this mission would get them both killed. The first 300 meters of their approach went smoothly, using natural cover in the chaos of battle to mask their movement. But the final approach to the water tower required crossing an open area that would expose them to observation from multiple directions. Elena waited until a particularly intense firefight drew attention away from their intended route, then moved with fluid speed across the open ground. Her Montana hunting experience served her well. She moved like prey, avoiding predators, using terrain features and timing to remain undetected even while crossing dangerous ground. Torres followed her path exactly, trusting Elena's judgment even as every instinct told him they were walking into certain death. They reached the base of the water tower without being detected, but Elena immediately realized that their problems were just beginning. The ladder to the elevated platform was completely exposed, and climbing it would make them visible to anyone looking in their direction. "Cover me," Elena told Torres as she began climbing. "If anyone spots us, lay down suppressing fire and get the hell out of here." "Like hell I'm leaving you here." Elena looked down at Torres with an expression that combined affection and exasperation. "Torres, If I don't make it up there, this whole crazy plan fails anyway. But if you get killed trying to follow me, we definitely both die for nothing. Torres nodded reluctantly and took position to provide security while Elena climbed toward the shooting platform that would either give her the angle she needed to influence the battle or expose her to fire from every enemy combatant in the area. Reaching the top of the water tower, Elena immediately understood both the potential and the peril of her chosen position. From 40 feet above the base, she could see the entire battle spread out like a three-dimensional map. Enemy forces were advancing through predictable routes exactly as she had anticipated, but they were also much more numerous and better coordinated than intelligence had suggested. More importantly, her elevated position made her visible to anyone who looked in her direction. She would have excellent shooting opportunities, but she would also be completely exposed to return fire from multiple directions. Elena set up her rifle on the platform's railing and began identifying priority targets among the enemy forces advancing through the base. Her ammunition was limited to whatever she had carried with her, meaning that every shot would have to count for maximum tactical effect. Her first target was an enemy fighter who appeared to be directing assault teams toward the base's command center. Eliminating him might disrupt the coordinated advance that was threatening to overrun the entire facility. The range was only 300 meters, much closer than her previous engagements. But the target was moving through an area with multiple obstructions and changing elevation. Elena would need to time her shot to catch the target at a moment when he was exposed and stationary. She watched through her scope as the enemy commander moved between covered positions, clearly coordinating the assault through hand signals and radio communications. When he paused to issue orders to a group of fighters preparing to assault the command bunker, Aylin took her shot. The result was immediate and dramatic. Not only was the target eliminated, but the fighters who had been receiving orders immediately began showing confusion and hesitation. The coordinated assault on the command center faltered just as it was approaching success. But Elena's shot had also revealed her position to every combatant in the area. Almost immediately, enemy fire began impacting around the water tower as multiple fighters tried to engage the sniper, who had appeared in an impossible location. "Contact!" Torres shouted from below, returning fire at enemy positions that were trying to maneuver closer to the water tower. "We've got multiple hostiles converging on our position." Elena ignored the incoming fire and focused on identifying her next target. She had perhaps minutes before enemy forces would coordinate effective fire against her position or before they reached the base of the water tower and eliminated her ability to retreat. Her second target was a heavy weapons team that had set up a machine gun position covering one of the main defensive bunkers. Coalition forces trapped in that bunker were taking continuous fire that prevented them from contributing to the overall defense of the base. Elena adjusted her scope for the 250-meter range and prepared to engage multiple targets in rapid succession. She would need to eliminate both the machine gun operator and his assistant quickly enough to prevent them from returning effective fire. Her first shot took out the primary gunner, but the assistant immediately moved to take over the weapon. Elena's second shot, fired less than 3 seconds after the first, eliminated the assistant before he could engage friendly positions. The effect on the trapped coalition forces was immediate. Free from suppressing fire, they were able to begin engaging enemy forces that had been advancing under cover of the machine gun. But Elena's rapid fire had also provided enemy forces with precise information about her location. Rifle fire was beginning to impact the water tower platform with increasing accuracy as enemy marksmen adjusted their aim. "Sergeant, we need to move," Torres called from below. "They're starting to bracket our position." Elena knew Torres was right, but she also knew that abandoning her position now would waste the tactical advantage they had gained at such great cost. She had ammunition for perhaps 6 more shots, and there were still critical targets that could influence the outcome of the battle. Her third target was an enemy sniper who had taken position in one of the base's own buildings and was systematically picking off coalition defenders. Elena could see muzzle flashes from the sniper's position, but she couldn't see the sniper himself clearly enough for a precision shot. She would need to wait for the enemy sniper to expose himself while taking a shot at coalition forces. It was a deadly game of patience, where the first person to make a mistake would likely be killed instantly. The opportunity came when the enemy sniper shifted position to engage a group of soldiers attempting to reinforce the perimeter defense. For just a moment, his profile was visible through Elena's scope. Elena's shot covered the 200-meter distance in less than half a second, striking the enemy sniper with precision that eliminated the threat immediately. But as she prepared to engage her next target, Elena felt the water tower platform shake under the impact of heavy weapons fire. The enemy was now directing coordinated fire at the tower structure itself, trying to collapse her position rather than just eliminate her personally. "Sergeant, the tower is taking structural damage," Torres shouted. "We've got maybe 60 seconds before this thing comes down." Elena looked through her scope one more time, searching for targets that could justify the enormous risk they were taking. The battle below was beginning to shift in favor of coalition forces as air support arrived and reinforcements approached the base perimeter. But there was one more target that could ensure victory rather than just survival. Through her scope, Elena could see what appeared to be the overall enemy commander directing withdrawal operations for forces that were beginning to realize their assault had failed. Eliminating this commander might prevent an organized retreat that would allow enemy forces to regroup and attack again. The target was approximately 400 meters away, partially concealed behind a concrete barrier, and surrounded by fighters who would immediately return fire if Elena revealed her position. It would be the most difficult shot of her career, taken from a platform that was actively being destroyed by enemy fire, against a target that would expose her to immediate retaliation from multiple directions. Elena settled into her final shooting position, her breathing automatically slowing despite the chaos and destruction around her. This shot would define not just the outcome of this battle, but the legend of the ghost sniper for generations of soldiers who would hear the story. She squeezed the trigger with smooth precision, feeling the familiar recoil as her rifle fired its final shot of the engagement. 400 meters away, the enemy commander dropped exactly where Elena had aimed. The immediate effect on enemy forces was devastating. Without centralized command, their withdrawal became a rout, as individual groups abandoned coordinated movement and fled in different directions. "Target down," Elena shouted to Torres as she began her rapid descent from the collapsing water tower. Mission accomplished. Torres was already moving toward their extraction route, as the water tower began tilting under the cumulative damage from enemy fire. Elena reached the ground just as the structure collapsed completely, missing her by less than 10 feet. As they moved toward the rally point, where coalition reinforcements were establishing a secure perimeter, Elena felt the profound exhaustion that comes after extreme combat stress. Every muscle in her body ached, her ears were ringing from constant weapons fire, and her hands were shaking from adrenaline overload. But she was alive, Torres was alive, and the base had been saved through actions that would be remembered long after the immediate tactical situation was forgotten. 2 weeks later, Elena found herself standing once again in Colonel Rodriguez's office, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of desperation and frustration, there was something approaching awe in the colonel's expression. "Vasquez, I've got orders here that are going to change your life," Rodriguez said, holding up official documents that bore multiple high-level signatures. "You're being promoted to Sergeant First Class, effective immediately. You're also being transferred to Special Operations Command for advanced training and assignment to classified missions." Elena looked at the orders with mixed emotions. The recognition was gratifying, but she had grown attached to the soldiers she had been serving with and the mission they had accomplished together. "Sir, what about Torres?"
Torres is being promoted to sergeant and assigned as your permanent spotter.
"Apparently someone in Washington thinks you two work well together." Rodriguez stood and extended his hand to Elena. "Vasquez, I owe you an apology. When I first assigned you to this position, it was because I was desperate and running out of options. I never imagined that you would not just solve our immediate problem, but redefine what's possible for snipers operating in hostile territory." Elena shook his hand, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past month. "Sir, I just did what needed to be done. Any soldier in this unit would have done the same thing." Rodriguez smiled. "That's where you're wrong, Sergeant. What you did wasn't just about courage or determination or technical skill, though you demonstrated all of those qualities. What you did was prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are exactly what a desperate situation requires." As Elena prepared to leave Forward Operating Base Chapman for her new assignment, word of the ghost sniper had already spread throughout the military and beyond. Stories of the mysterious marksman who could appear anywhere, eliminate any threat, and vanish without a trace were being told in military bases around the world. But Elena knew that the real story wasn't about mystique or legend. It was about a young woman from Montana who had refused to accept limitations, who had turned prejudice into motivation, and who had proven that extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary individuals to step up and do the impossible. Years later, when military historians would analyze the engagement at Forward Operating Base Chapman, they would identify it as a turning point in how coalition forces approached counter-sniper operations in mountainous terrain. The tactics that Elena developed during her brief but impactful deployment would be studied and adapted for use in conflicts around the world. But for Elena, the most important legacy of her time as the Ghost Sniper wasn't tactical or strategic. It was the knowledge that she had served alongside soldiers who trusted her with their lives, and that she had proven worthy of that trust when it mattered most. The Ghost Sniper would continue to serve with distinction in classified operations around the world, but the legend had been born in the mountains of Afghanistan, where an impossible young woman had shown that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are exactly what the world needs most. And in barracks and bases around the world, soldiers would continue to tell the story of the day when everyone scoffed at the Ghost Sniper until the general saw her record, and everything changed forever.